Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Stirling Faux on AM 650.
Welcome back to the program. Today we're talking about solutions to debt. Some solutions you may not even be aware of. Joining us today in studio is the president of Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy and proposal administrators. George Abakhan is with us. And George, you have 5 offices, 3 of them within our signal range in Vancouver, Victoria, and Surrey. You've got a couple more, one up in Prince George and another one in the Okanagan in Vernon. So I don't know whether is business flourishing? I guess in your business it is, but it means a lot of people are in trouble.
Well, there's at least, as I said before, about 11,500 insolvencies in BC every year.
Right.
And it varies very, very, very closely to that number. We actually work out of several other centres as part of our business. We'll work out in Nanaimo, Castlegar, Kelowna, especially Kelowna, Kamloops. Generally, we go where the business is, and
okay.
we'll meet people on a 24-hour basis. Well, maybe not the midnight hours, but we'll work after hours on weekends and advise people because people have trouble. When they're in trouble, they want to be dealt with right away.
Right. And we should mention moneytroubles.ca is a website that is Abakhan and Associates site and a very user-friendly forum. And that's, moneytroubles.ca. It's a great name for a website for your business because people only come to professionals like yourself, George, when they're in pretty serious trouble.
Oh, it can be very, very stressful. I mean, as I think I indicated to somebody, that we actually carry a box of Scotties in the office for that very reason, because many people come in distraught, but they also leave very happy many, many times because of what we can tell them.
Well, one of the things that happens, and it's a sort of a spiral, isn't it? You talked about insolvency and what that means. Insolvency simply is a term that describes a person who can't pay his or her debts. Full stop. If you can't pay your debts, you're insolvent. Period. So that's what happens. First of all, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're skipping the phone company this month and the electrical company next month, and you're leapfrogging creditor over creditor. You're just trying to keep the ball in the air. And like that guy you gave us an example of a few minutes ago, he was making $3,900 a month and paying out $2,400 in just debt servicing alone, leaving the poor fella $1,500 a month to pay his mortgage, his gas, his food, his car payment. Not a lot. And that's, in some cases, that's pretty typical. People end up in your office pretty financially messed up, don't they?
Well, that's absolutely true. And garnishees is one thing. I mean, if you file a proposal, we can get rid of the garnishee.
And that fellow you referred to had a garnishee from Revenue or Canada Revenue Agency, didn't he?
Right.
That's awful stuff, that.
And if a lot of the times people can come in, they have a judgment against them. They put it on the house. Mm-hmm. The judgment is put on the house.
A lien of some kind, eh?
Again, if we file a proposal and or a bankruptcy, depending on what the circumstances are, that lien or judgment becomes part of the proposal.
But even before you get to the judgment against you or all of those other things, you've gone through a period of time in which every creditor you owe money is angry at you. Some of them have farmed your account out to collection agencies. Those people are hounding you on the telephone, in your mailbox, doing, in many cases, extremely illegal things to try and intimidate you into paying your debts, because they're in for a piece of the action if you do. So all of those wolves at your door, George, can be made to shut up by and only by a licensed trustee, correct?
Not totally correct. I mean, a credit counselor could advise the same thing and advise that he's trying to make a settlement. But the moment the credit collector goes after you and you advise them that George Abakhan or Abakhan and Associates, they know that it's a trustee firm and that there'll be a proposal coming down the road or a bankruptcy.
Right.
And most of the time, there are some collectors that won't buy it, most of the time they'll back right off and they'll wait for the documentation to come from us.
Right.
Sometimes when we're still dealing with debtors, it takes a while, maybe a couple of months, they will actually phone us and ask us whether we're dealing with them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, but generally, as soon as they tell the creditor or the collection agent that they're dealing with Abakhan and Associates, they'll back right off.
Right. The wolf at the door suddenly becomes much quieter.
Well, he also becomes more polite.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk to us, though, about these two options. I think that many of us in British Columbia who are consumers don't even know about such a thing as a consumer proposal. And yet, for those of us at the end of our financial tether, and in many cases our wits at the same time, all we know is everything has just gone right off a cliff. And you know, something dramatic has to happen here or it's all over. And all of a sudden, so they come into, I'm sure people come into your office quite regularly going, Mr. Abakhan, I think I need to go bankrupt.
That's right.
And what do you say when they say that? Do you ask them if they're aware of something called a consumer proposal?
Well, what I generally say to them is, they say, well, I'm not sure you actually have to go bankrupt. Let me have a little bit of information about you, and we'll assess what the options are.
Why don't you walk us through the process by way of helping us understand the difference, George, between a consumer proposal and a bankruptcy? What, for example, are the criteria that you have that would make either one the route to choose?
Well, the dividend rate to the creditors is really the bottom line. Do you make more money on filing a proposal or a debt settlement, as I call it?
Okay.
Or do the creditors actually gain more money by going bankrupt? So the first thing we have to do is assess what the person would have in a bankruptcy. Now, under the superintendent's regulations, there are certain payments that a person or certain receipts that a person is allowed in a bankruptcy situation. You're allowed to live on, say, if you're a single person, you're allowed to live on $2,014 a month.
Okay.
That's not a hell of a lot of money.
Right.
But that's what they allow. They don't care how much you spend, you're just allowed that amount. So if you're earning $3,900 a month, you're only allowed $2,000, then the surplus, the $1,900, half of that goes to the trustee, and half of it stays with the individual, with the debtor.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's $850 and $950 actually, that I would get, times 21 months, because the bankruptcy is now extended from 9 months to 21 months. So approximately $20,000 now has to go into the bankruptcy estate, and then we have the federal government gives us a set fee schedule.
Right.
So out of that, we would probably get in the approximately, say, I think about $8,000 for administration fees, and the balance would go to the creditors.
Sure.
Invariably, so all that has to happen is that the proposal has to be better than the bankruptcy. So in that case...
So do you prepare a twin set of documents and submit them both to the creditors?
No, we prepare a schedule that shows A, bankruptcy, B, proposal.
Okay.
And at the bottom it says how many cents on the dollar it goes to the creditors in a bankruptcy, and how many goes to proposal. So invariably there'll be maybe from 0 to 10 cents on the dollar in the bankruptcy. In the proposal, as in this situation, the proposal was probably going to be around 28 cents. Now, 28 cents is a good return to most creditors, and they'll accept it. Some may demand more, depending on what the person's income and expense statement says.
Right.
But in a bankruptcy, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. I get $950. I get my set fee and anything that's left over. Now, that person is now faced with paying $950 for 21 months. In the proposal, he pays $400, but he has to pay it for 60 months.
Right.
And if you add that up, it's more than the amount of money that would be paid under the bankruptcy, and you get a bigger dividend. Our fee coincidentally, is probably less, in most cases, is less than the bankruptcy fee.
Right, right. And it's all federally regulated. There's no gouging even possible, is there?
But there's a lot of onuses on the bankrupt to do this during that process. He has to file income and expense statements every month. He has to do his 2 counseling sessions. And if he doesn't pay his $900, $950 every month, then the bankruptcy can be extended until such time as he's paid off all his obligations.
Which of the two, the consumer proposal or the bankruptcy, has the most negative effect on an individual's credit rating?
The bankruptcy does.
Okay.
Yes, very much so. In the proposal, you can pay it off early. We allow prepayment no penalty prepayments.
Okay.
If you can pay it off in 3 years, you under the credit rating agencies, bankruptcy is R9, proposals R7. So, but it does stay on the credit rating thing for 3 years after you do your proposal. But you can start redoing your credit situation by actually getting a prepaid credit card, where you put some money in, and you still get the use of a credit card, but you now have to fund it. And then with the credit counseling that we offer as well, you should learn how to handle your debt.
Now, I was just going to interrupt you there, because you've talked now a couple of times about taking these credit counseling classes. That's a requirement of both the consumer proposal and the bankruptcy, isn't it, on the part of the consumer?
And we have to offer it,
right,
and it is part of the costs. We have to absorb those costs.
And in many cases, it would be an exercise in financial literacy, George, that would be a first in some of the lives of those people who end up in your offices.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Last week I had a couple of retired teachers, and pretty well the first question I asked them, I said, well, I guess you got all this debt while you were earning lots of money. And they said, that's right, that's exactly right. As soon as I got retired, my income dropped by significantly, and now I'm faced with a situation I got to go bankrupt. And I said, well, I think we've already established you don't have to go bankrupt. But they ended up doing a proposal. They had $60,000 worth of debt that they acquired, and they were making the payments, no problems at all.
Right.
But then they retired, and
the ability to pay was diminished all of a sudden.
Exactly.
Right.
And they asked me, am I going to lose my house? And I said, no, just keep making the payments on the mortgage. Am I going to lose my car? I said, no, just keep making the payments on the car. We can get rid of all your other debt and just leave you with those 2 payments to make, and then you should have some surplus income to be able to live properly.
Interesting. And that those apprehensions, when you've been the subject of harassing phone calls and letters and people yelling at you and angry at you and telling you you're just you're worthless, you're abrogating your responsibilities, you're just blah blah blah. You get to a point where, first of all, you start to feel like, I'm the only person in the world this is happening to.
Right.
And secondly, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose. So people come into your, and this retired couple you were just talking to last week, they expressed an apprehension, George, that I'll bet you hear a lot. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my car. I'm not even going to be able to get a job because I won't have a car to go to work in.
Exactly.
I mean, people come, and they're pretty strung out, aren't they, when they finally get to you?
But if I can get rid of the payments that they have to make on all their other debt, and they can start afresh on it, then they have enough money to make those payments to the mortgage and the car. And in some cases, I advocate that they should get rid of the car and let it be seized, because under the rules in British Columbia, you seize or sue. So the car dealer or the car financier seizes the car. His rights are now against the car.
Right.
And
your credit record's hooped anyway, so who cares if you have a foreclosure or a lease?
Exactly.
I mean, it's not going to make any difference at that point, is it?
And on the point about the mortgages, most banks if there is a foreclosure and it goes through, are more than happy to have you stay there because their insurance is less, and they look at, you tend to look after the house. They prefer to have that than have the house empty and get it vandalized.
I suppose as we go to this this next break, I guess we've identified the conversation as well. A little bit of education goes an awfully long way, and financial literacy is not one of Canadians' strong points. It could be the education system, George. I'm not sure, but we're just not the smartest financial country on earth, and that's just because, well, especially these days, money is awfully cheap and awfully tempting. And as a result, we get ourselves into some pretty difficult pickles. And we frequently are fortunate to learn about companies like Abakhan and Associates here to help us out, offer some hope and some structure for getting out of debt and getting on with life. We'll continue this conversation with George Abakhan, the president of Abakhan and Associates. And by the way, if you want to check him out online during this break, pop over to moneytroubles.ca, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about the baby boomer lifestyle. Boomer Life on AM 650.